Good evening, everyone. Stick with us today as we go into part two of our two-part series with David Brennan. This is the Martin Memo.
The Martin Memo. What do you think changed the trajectory of the 2024 election? Was it the lawfare or Trump being shot? Was it him serving up fries at McDonald's? The garbage truck? I mean, there's so many memorable moments. What do you think stands out?
It's amazing, right? That's so funny because he ran, in my memory, almost a perfect campaign compared to others. It's so it's so good. And I know Kamala Harris ran such a poor campaign, and, I guess you could say Biden Harris because Biden was there for a while. They were doing so poorly that it contrasted so well for Trump. Everything just hit for him, and that's great when you're doing a campaign and everything hits well for you, and your candidate keeps stepping in the bucket and can't get their foot out of it. I know a lot of people look at it and say, when he was shot in Butler and then got back up and said, fight, 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 that was the turning point. And I think it was for certain people, like younger people, especially younger males, who all of a sudden are stepping forward and saying, wow, when I saw him do that, that's like, what a man. This guy's, I'm with him. And I agree, but I think I think the lawfare really started that upward rise where people were looking at the cases and as they were unfolding saying, this is complete nonsense. You're charging this guy for things, and it becomes obvious you're just trying to stop him from running. And I honestly thought when they first filed all these things, I thought he's not going to overcome this in the primary. DeSantis is going to win because the Republican voters are going to say, we just can't take 4 more years of this. But those things fell apart so quickly, and to Trump's credit, he just burst through them saying, I'm not. That's, I think, where it changed things. And then, when he was shot, it just took off. That's probably where it was already on the upwards swing, but I think the younger voters, the people that generally weren't going to vote with him, young men, minority men too, who said, you know what, I really like this guy.
Yeah.
I'm now with him, even though I've never voted for a Republican maybe, or I even talked to one guy who said he disliked Trump in 2016. But as time went on, with what the Democrats did and what he saw with Trump, especially with the shooting, he thought, yeah, I'm going to go with Trump. So, that's how I see it. I don't know. I mean, other people disagree and think it's all based on the shooting, but I don't know. Gerald Ford was, shot and someone took a shot at him.
Right.
Nobody reelected him.
Yeah. I hate to admit this, but I just had to get it more for laughs than anything. I ended up purchasing the Kamala Harris 107 Days. And in there, she states that she didn't have enough time, and that's why she lost. I think it was the other way around, because at first, if you remember those first probably month, maybe month and a half, she was leading in the polls. She had a lot of momentum, and then people really started listening to her, word salad of answers and different things like that, and, how she wouldn't change a thing when it came to the Biden administration to hers. So I think she was the biggest enemy, and I think she had too much time, and if maybe she had a smaller amount, she would have just done fine. But
Yeah, her strongest day was probably her first day, right? I mean,
yeah.
it should have been 1 day instead of 107 days because, and part of it is it showed the contrast with Trump, I think, because Trump will talk to anybody about anything. Sometimes it drives you crazy. I saw where he was talking about we need a new name for the NFL. Why do you care?
Yeah.
I mean, it's things like this. You go, why are you talking about that? But to your point, Harris wouldn't even say something she would have done differently in the 4 years, and it's so easy because of the immigration issue was on everybody's mind.
Right.
I mean, Is there something you would have done differently? Yes.
Yeah.
I would have worked on, immigration reform and stopped the border crossings while we did that. It's not, and then you still make an argument that, hey, we need legal immigration, but not illegal, and this is how I would have done it, and we failed on that. But now I know better, and instead, she's like, not a thing. What? I think even when she did that, I think she did it on The View. Even those women there were like looking around, thinking, "Oh my God, what do we have here?"
Right. Yeah. One of them has their own separate podcast, and they were describing how they expected like this answer, and she didn't say anything, and she was just so confused on how you couldn't say anything, and I think that was definitely a point that really kind of sunk her campaign right there, is when she said that.
Yeah, I think so too.
With that being said, the Democrats argued that Trump was a danger to democracy. The voters gave him clearly a decisive victory. If the voters say Trump isn't the danger, what is the real danger to democracy?
Yeah, I finished the book on this point, and go through what all the dangers are, and there are a lot. But, it all comes down to, in the end, besides the fact I harp on the media being a problem, because the media was once known as the fourth estate. Like, you were supposed to be out there keeping everybody honest. The referee, if you will, right? You're not supposed to be cheerleading, which is what they're doing now, rah, rah, rah. And that's not good journalism. But if you're sitting there as the ref throwing the penalty flag and telling people, no, that's wrong, and correcting it, and with facts, not with we debunked it. I'm talking about if someone says something false, whether it's, Trump or his opponents, okay, point it out. But it's got to be a real false fact. It can't be just, I don't like what you said, and it's, that, which is where they're at now. It's the cheerleader. I think, that's part of it, but it's not only that. The bigger problem is, these pillars of government that we have, like our court system, are under attack. It's under attack with lawfare for sure when you go after a candidate like Trump. One of the reasons nobody, well, maybe some people wanted, but, the cooler heads prevailed back in the Nixon era, because Nixon, they could have charged with a crime. Gerald Ford pardoned him, saying that he didn't want the country to go through a criminal trial. I think there were also some discussions among, Republicans and Democrats that if we get him out of there, we're fine. If he resigns, we're fine. Yeah. And he was told, you don't have the votes, you will be impeached, you'll be removed from office. Yeah. After that, you might be charged criminally. It seems now, not as big a deal as maybe it was then, but, people forget that. They argued, there was some kind of deal, he was pardoned. Yeah, the deal in effect was, we don't want to tear down the presidency. And we've had this tearing down of the presidency by calling, Trump, Hitler, a fascist. I was watching a Bill Maher clip, his podcast, and he had Seth Green on, who I wouldn't call a political genius by any stretch, but he's repeating comments like, people are okay that we're not going to have any future elections, and who said that? Trump has never mentioned. I mean, he said jokingly that we won't need another election. Yeah, he won't. He's done. Yeah. He knows that. But, they take everything literally and then try to turn it into he's authoritarian. That's ripping the presidency down. It makes no sense to do that. And, with lawfare, you're making a mockery of the justice system, where judges are out there, even now, making decisions that are purely political. And they shouldn't be. Once you're a judge, especially a federal judge, you're there for life. Kick your feet up. You don't owe anything to the committeeman or the politician that got you in there. You owe it to the system to be a good judge. And, some people realize that. Back in Burr's time, Justice Marshall oversaw the trial, and he was maybe the greatest Supreme Court justice ever. So he understood that. We have attacks on individual Supreme Court justices where they actually one guy was trying to kill Kavanaugh, and but also that they rip these guys down as if they're not deciding it based on the facts. I mean, I think there's some politics with the Supreme Court because of wherever they come from. Like I think of, if you're conservative, this is going to be your opinion, and then the liberal side might not agree with it. It doesn't mean that you're a politically like a congressman. You're looking at the facts and the cases, and I think that happens on both sides, where you might get a liberal interpretation or a conservative interpretation, and that doesn't tear it down. That's part of the system. We built that in. But when people are trying to say, these guys are crooked, or they talk about expanding the court from 9 to whatever number would give the majority to them, and not realizing, wait a minute, the next guy will come back in and make it 10 more. Pretty soon we'll have a Supreme Court of 100. What are we doing? So I think that's the problem. When you start ripping those pillars of government down and going after it, you are taking out the whole system. And even to a point, the elections, where you make elections about, I think I only figured this out recently, illegal immigration. I used to think both sides, the Republicans are wrong and the Democrats, and I bought into, the Republican business owners want the cheap labor, the Democrats want the votes. No, it's not that. That's what they fed us. What it really is, though, are electoral votes. You get the illegals and you count them in the census. And, Trump was right about this, too. It shouldn't be in the census. You shouldn't be counting illegals. We're not representing those people, but they're counted. And if you took out the illegals out of California, Illinois, and New York, I think it was a 10-person shift. It might be more. They would go to Florida, Texas, Tennessee. Hey, those are all Republican-led states. Right. So that shift of 10 is amazing. But the problem is, I think the Democrats did that knowing it, and I was not aware enough to even know that was happening. And I assume most people weren't. Most politicians weren't. The Republicans never brought it up until Trump did. Right. So either Trump or some of his advisors were the ones who were smart enough to say, this is why they're doing that. And that's another way you're hurting democracy, because we're supposed to have representatives of the citizens of the United States, not of Poland and Mexico and, Afghanistan or wherever else people are coming from.
Yeah.
It's not what it's supposed to be.
How would you like to see the media behave going forward?
Wow. Opposite of how they're doing it. I'd like it to be, they go back to the basics. The basics were, who, what, where, when, why, and how. You put that was supposed to be in your lead paragraph. How you had to pick the most important one. That's how you wrote your story. Now I'll get the Chicago Tribune delivered to my house. I won't see any of those factors, but I will see the writer's opinion. And sometimes they print the Associated Press story, so it's not always their writers. Newspapers are going out. They won't be around in 30 years, but for now, while I'm reading them, I'd like them to at least try to do it honestly. Use those basics of journalism. Don't use unnamed sources. They too easily let people say, always an unnamed source. And I understand if you're going to do that, then you have to support that. Where's the evidence? Like, they provided you documents. You've got a second source saying it's true. Okay, I'll let you use the unnamed source. But when you're using, like, this Cook case where there are, people close to the investigation, 2 people who know, well, that tells me those are the FBI agents talking to Cook and assuming he's speaking, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody out there. If you're picked up on a crime, call an attorney. What are you doing? Even if you're not picked up on a crime and they knock on your door, you can't be talking to them and think you're going to talk your way out of it. They already know what they're looking at. So, from the defense attorney's perspective, don't do that. But I think for journalism, if they get back to those things, maybe they can build credibility back in. And I'd like to see CNN, for instance. Nobody's watching it anyhow, so why not go back to the basics where that used to be the network people turned into for news? You got straight news. And, instead of having people on there who are, they spread opinions that are so ridiculous. You wonder, how did they get there? I mean,
Yeah. No. Yeah. So it cut out there for a second. I do apologize, but yeah, you're
Okay.
absolutely right with that as well. And can you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, good. With that all being said, do you have any hope for the media based on its coverage? Let me do that again. Do you have any hope for the media based on its coverage of illegal immigration, the Venezuela drug boat strikes, or Trump's cognitive state?
No, I don't. I mean, it's funny because the same media, Joe Biden, God bless him, was in a terrible state for a long time, and you could tell. Just, you had all the makings. If you've had anyone in your family with Alzheimer's or dementia, there is a great change in them, and it's sad. And, you could see that in Biden. It wasn't just aging. As we all age, we get a little slower. But this is obvious that his cognitive function wasn't there. What's funny is Trump, while he says some wacky things, he is the same guy, at least going back to 2015 and maybe further. That's how he's always been. I don't see him slowing down or changing. It seems those other stories, like the Venezuelan drug boats, nobody else has tried to do anything, and now Trump is doing something. We have 100,000 people die of drug issues, or then you get addicted to drugs. It's awful. It especially affects younger people who may not know what they're taking, and even if they do, they don't know the effects, the long-term effects. And instead of saying, "Wow, I'm glad someone's doing that," they are spending so much time trying to figure out if it's a war crime to blow up drug boats. Clear that they're terrorists. I think he has the right to do that. And, and you saw it, unfortunately, with the illegal immigration, where some of them didn't even go to the border to report on it. And then they argue over how people got here and why they're coming here. And that's not the job of the media. All they were doing is broadcasting what the Democrats were saying, and they're doing it still with ICE enforcement. You see ICE out there. They're a law enforcement agency of the federal government. They have a job to do. And, if the FBI was treated like that by people on the street, or your local police department, where they're throwing things at them, they're fighting with them. I mean, I think any of those people should be prosecuted when they do that. It's insane. And the media covers the story as if ICE is the bad guy. They spent more time, at least here in the Chicago area, talking about what the ICE agents were doing rather than what the people were doing. Like, if I'm not illegal, I don't know why I'm out there on the street throwing things at the ICE agents. Yes, go get the ICE guy can go wherever he wants. Go get that guy out of there. I don't care. Stop the car. But they will cause trouble, and they're making it difficult. There's already been ICE agents shot at, where you make it difficult for them to do the job, where they have to look over their shoulder. They don't know who's attacking them. It's terrible, and I think you can put all that back on the media, on the way they handle it. And the Democrats also, because they're spreading these stories. I think they wouldn't, though, if the media would hold them accountable. You can't allow them to tell these stories if ICE is the bad guy in this story. The plot is not that ICE has come in and kidnapped people, as some people are calling it. They're kidnapping them off the street. We have elected officials here saying that. Nobody's being kidnapped. if you're kidnapped, it's a lot different than that. So, kind of does injustice to the people that really are kidnapped or go through things like that. And I trace it all back to, the media. Some people call the media the legacy. In the book, I name it the Dem media. And the reason is, you know, there's a poll that's done every survey. The latest one, I think, is 2 or 3 years old now. Only 3% of the journalists in America self-identify as Republicans. 3% in all the newsrooms, and we have some real red states. I mean, Wyoming, Alabama, Mississippi. We've got red states where you can't find many Democrats, and they don't have. There's only 3%, so that's the problem. But there's bigger problems than that. The interconnection, and it really started with Obama, where you have people who run the networks, like Rashida Jones was at the time I wrote the book, the president of NBC. Her life partner, Ed Fisher, was working for the D.C. mayor, a Democrat. He's also a lobbyist. He's an insider. You have a producer at ABC News, Ian Cameron, was married to Susan Rice, who was National Security Advisor with Obama. You had Ben Rhodes, Deputy National Security Advisor for Obama. His brother was the president of CBS at the time. And ABC's president, Ben Sherwood, is the brother of Elizabeth Sherwood, who's another Obama advisor. You have CNN's president, Virginia Mosley, was her spouse was a high-ranking official with Clinton, and the Clinton as Secretary of State and in the campaign. It's a real problem. And there's very few, they won't admit it. You have George Stephanopoulos, who's a great political advisor, but not a very fair news guy to be sitting on Sunday mornings doing a news program. He just, he's not fair. I wouldn't say put Stephen Miller on there either as the host. He's not a journalist either. But that's what they've done, and they kind of controlled the media. Very few of these guys will admit they're biased. One guy I do put in the book, George Ramos, because he was so honest about it. He's a anchor with Univision, and they confronted him about the bias in the media, and he said, it's not his job to report objectively; it's to confront power. And the power he was confronting, he said, was because when you have a president who's a racist and a liar, it's time to redefine your job as a journalist. No, it's your time to get out of the job as a journalist and go join a political campaign or some kind of movement. You could be an advocate. Do that kind of stuff. It's something you see in politics. You see guys running campaigns. That's fine. They do a great job of that. They shouldn't be journalists. We have this intersection that's really killing media.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right on that, and I think it's funny the whole now the Venezuelan drug boat stories on how it's a fishing boat. It's not a drug boat, and meanwhile there's 20 large tubs on there and there's no fishing poles in sight. It just goes to show you that the media bias is still alive, and unfortunately it's very well. So I'm very thankful that someone like you is just bringing this to light, and your story hopefully will get out there into the mainstream and help cram some of the narrative out there.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question, and then I have one lighthearted question afterwards. But the first one being is, where can people get your book and find you?
Yeah, the book can be purchased online, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. I have my own website, authordennisbrennan.com. Any of those are good. It's now in paperback, hard copy, ebook, and I just signed something to do an audiobook. And they won't have to listen to my voice. They'll actually have a professional do it, so that's good. And I think that's going to be out by Christmas. So Yeah, I've been convinced that people listen to books. It's something that was strange to me because, like, I put books on the shelf behind me after I read them, and I have other books at the office, and yeah, I don't. The audiobook I haven't gotten into yet, but I'm going to jump into that, I guess. And I am on X, as Dennis Brennan 61, and I'm on Truth Social, DAB 535. I'm also on Facebook, Dennis A. Brennan, with a photo much like this, so it's easy to find. And I think I am on other things, but I don't handle it, so I'm not sure with those other social media outlets. But we'll become hopefully more involved in those.
Yeah. Well, sir, the final question that I have for you is, are you a sports fan?
I am.
Okay. Are you a Chicago Bear fan by chance?
Yes, I am.
Oh, well, we have a great game that's happening today because I am from Wisconsin originally, so I'm a cheesehead, so I'm looking at my my Packer flag right here in the background, but I thought you must be a Bears fan, so that's perfect.
Yeah, and finally, I don't know how it's going to go today or in 2 weeks, but finally I can at least say I don't feel bad about the Bears playing the Packers. Often, when the game would come up, I have a close friend who's a Packer fan, and he had to put up with the Bears back in '85 being great, and Packers not so much.
Right.
So now, for the last, 15 years, he has been all over me about the Bears and trying to get me to gamble. I try to tell him, oh, no, I don't gamble. Of course I don't gamble. My team was no good. I couldn't. I'm not betting that. Now, though, it should be, I hope it's a good game, and I hope you're crying in the cheese when it's all said and done.
Well, you know what? At least there's a rivalry that's been restored now. It's been a little too long that we've gone too comfy, but I think it'll be a great game, and I definitely am looking forward to it. And yeah, hopefully no injuries. That's the biggest thing. As
Right.
we both have postseason aspirations here, but
Yeah.
well, sir, it was great to have you on today. Thank you so much for stopping by. This has been a pleasure, and hopefully that this book goes to the next level. But yeah, awesome.
I appreciate those thoughts. I hope it does too. And I really appreciate the fact that you had me on, and it was a real pleasant conversation. I hope anybody that listens gets something out of that. And if they want to read the book or listen to it when the audiobook comes out, that's great because then you have facts. Everything's referenced. So if you're a Trump fan, you can stick it in the face of the people who aren't Trump fans and go, but it's referenced right here. We have facts. It's not like journalism. This guy actually did some work.
Right. Well, I look forward to reading it as well. So, but sir, it's been a pleasure. And with that being said, well, folks, that's all we have in store for today. Join us on Friday as I go over a surprise topic. Write your comments on X. Join us on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. This has been the Martin Memo. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. The Martin Memo.